I left behind 11 years ago the humidity, mosquitoes, lakes, streams, and miles of forest in the Adirondacks, New York, to the man-made aqueducts, sunny sky, dry, and high elevations of Colorado. At first I noticed that the horizon was bigger, an account that the trees were far and few between. The moon is much larger here, and I assume the sun is closer to us as well. Breathing was difficult, and I felt like I was in a constant state of dehydration. You need to drink a couple quarts a day here. Funny thing is, I do not remember drinking water back in New York. Everything seems to have a sharp point here. The rocks, grasses, vegetation. The grass is the color of the wheat, and the stone was not gray, but red, yellow, blue, and even brown. The mountains are not smooth boulders, but rough and unstable slabs of stone, slipping under your feet as you walk. The soil seemed to be dust and hardened clay. I took many photos over the years and learned to appreciate Colorado even more. It gets hot here, and the sky is blue most of the year. However, it is a blue that pales in comparison to that of a sky near great bodies of water. The winters seem long, but the snow only remains for a moment. The sun never is really far away in Colorado. Good morning. It's Canadian Conquistador here. It's a beautiful morning in the fall, September. I'm turning 50 in like 10 days. This video, I hope to archive all my, well, not all of them, but majority of my artwork from my 30s and previous to like maybe early 20s. I went out to New York and I took pictures of all these pieces, and they're not the best quality photos, but you get the gist. It's basically just to archive all my artwork again, just like I did with some of my other videos. I archive pictures of my original gardens, and I just put them up on YouTube for my own enjoyment. But go ahead if you want to watch this video, and if you like art and you're curious of my style and maybe some of my influences of how I style my garden, you might have a little more insight. So if you like this video, go ahead and subscribe and hit the like button, and hope to see you soon. See ya. So his first sketches of me when I was a little child is one of my first dreams I ever had, of carrying a real heavy dresser drawer by myself in diapers. Somebody else was on the other end holding it. This is just a portrait, random portrait. Here, some figure studies, a woman trying to be simplified in the line work. Here's some kind of fallen king clown and a child prince. This was the back of my house. The back of my house, a winter scene with a graveyard and a fence, some trees. If I really don't have much to say about some of these, it's mainly because they're just sketches. They were just random thoughts, random images. Here's one of my child when he was my daughter. I had a lot of sleeping sketches because those were my models that would just sit there. This was a sketch of me for a bigger painting. Some more faces. Yeah, so when I prepare for a painting, typically I don't sketch actual imagery because I'm a kinetic thinker. I tend to write words and put symbols, and that just helps me think out the process, because when I read something I tend to get images in my head, and that tends for a thorough, more detailed illustration in the end. It's just the way I do it. So why big pens? Why do I draw with big pens? They tend to be handy. They seem to be everywhere. Nowadays it's more like fountain pens, but back in the day, big pens seem to be everywhere. So I would just pick them up by the packs of 20 for like $1 and draw. There's something about the release of the ink. I can control it more. The typical artist pens seem to just put out lines that are too uniformed for me, and so the big pen allows for shading that you can't really get from artist professional pens. It seems like the cross hatching is really mechanic looking, and I just don't like it. One thing bad about big pens is the ink seems to have a type of like shimmer to it. When you look at it from angles, it's really hard to photograph. It's one of those things you really have to have it in your hand to really see the image the way that I see it. Another picture of my daughter. It's easy to draw them when they sit still, you know, sleeping. Another thing I should mention about my style of drawing is I usually use a thicker paper, and when I apply pressure to draw, you can actually see that in the end it's almost an embossed texture to the paper. So if you were blind, you could probably actually see these pictures. The indentation from the ballpoint pen and the pressure that I apply leaves little canyons, and what's white is usually the embossed part. I also picked up blue ink once in a while, usually just because I couldn't find a black ink pen. I prefer black. Yeah, so anatomy studies. I like doing portraits, you can tell that. I don't like doing realistic portraits. I like doing images from my head, or what I see in the paper itself. A lot of people ask me how I see things, and it's just weird. It's almost like you can see shade imagery already in the paper, and I'm almost just copying it or tracing it. I know it's kind of crazy. Maybe it's all in my mind, but then I started adding color to some of these pictures, which I don't really necessarily like. I like it when they're just pure black and white, but these ones were when I was younger. Who knows? Got some weird imagery going on, but you can see I started getting more detailed, more aggressive, and filling in the paper, going to the edge, making borders. I read the Bible and got a lot of ideas from there. You read the Bible and your mind just goes in circles, going crazy with the imagery. But I enjoy that stuff, you know. I also was offered to illustrate a book, which this was one of the pictures. As you can see, the author accepted the pictures, took the pictures home, then came back and said I never gave her the pictures. So I took that as a learning curve, not to give up your pictures until you see the money, honey. So, are you enjoying the crows in the background? So this picture was a picture about an old Catholic priest that lived in New York, and back in the 1600s, I believe, and he traveled to upstate New York, and he encountered the Mohawks and was captured, and it's just one of my favorite drawings that I've done. It was one of the few drawings that I actually went out next to a river and I sketched out the actual bank, all the trees and everything, the water. And this one is of the famous story in the Bible about Moses. his brother Aaron, who went to the Pharaoh and told him to release my people, and they wouldn't listen. And you know that by not listening to God, you end up with bad repercussions, and the people were eventually let go. And this one was just from my mind of winter. I have this thing about like adventure in the winter, hunting back in the old days. Here, merchants are down by the shipyard, and they're in an old medieval docking town. You can tell there's a castle in the background. This one's kind of like, this one was my late teens, I believe I drew this one. It's unfinished, obviously, but I learned how to not jam too much stuff in. It gets blurry, hard to see. This is one. This is my biggest pen and ink drawing. It's like 3 feet by 2 feet. It took me like 6 months to draw it. It's an old medieval castle. Men have returned home from war. There's a couple dead people. Yep, that's really detailed. Lots of ink on this picture. Yeah, like the flying buttresses and the cathedral and the trebuchet. Everybody's armed. Like it. So now we're going into our mixed media stuff. Earlier I showed you a picture that I drew of a small child carrying a dresser drawer. This was the next step from that. Definitely a surreal image of a child reflecting in a mirror carrying a dresser with someone unknown carrying the other end, and I bore all the weight, or most of the weight. Interpret this imagery as you do or will. Has a lot of meaning to me that I've been pondering most of my life. So eventually it would happen. I'd start playing around with color, mostly crayons, artist crayons and pencils. And eventually I said, well, let's give this painting a try. But it's, you know, it's completely the opposite thing of drawing. Drawing, you're doing the lines, you're edging everything, where painting, you're basically filling in space. And so it's a total mind change, switching from drawing to painting. And it took me several years before I could get the concept of, you know, reversing your mind. There's a lot of changes involved when you're going from outlining to inlining and no lines at all, and dealing with color, and all that complicates. All those complications just, it wasn't an easy transition for me, let's just put it that way. But eventually I would keep playing around, and I just took up oil painting right off the bat and played with that for several years, and eventually did big, huge murals, which was another video. I showed the video about going into my mother's attic and pulling out some paintings. That was just a small collection. I don't really have access to any of my old oil paintings to give you updated photos about, but if I do find them, eventually I will post them here. You know I will. However, before I entered into the oil painting craft or art, I did mess around with some digital media, working with computer software to make drawings like this. These are pretty cool. It's a lot of work though. This is, you're talking early computers, not anything we have now that's just cut and paste. This is back in the, you know, early 90s, where you actually had to draw this stuff with a mouse. But I enjoyed making these. And there you have it, another video down on the art series. I really hope you enjoyed this. It was fun to make, actually, and now I have it archived on the internet. And it would be awesome if you could hit that subscribe button down below, and here, somewhere, yeah, and hit the little hand symbol, that thumbs up would be nice. And I will be back to you with some more videos on adventure, outdoor adventures, and artwork, and photography, and gardening, of course, and food force. And until then, we will see you.